What you are listening to now is the Central Indiana Sports Report podcast number 347.3, the college football report with Eric and Ryan Robinson. This week, their preview of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish 2025 team. We look at the offense, the defense, the coaching staff, and a peek at the schedule go week by week. And Eric and Ryan and guest Michelle Garmon of the Tipton Tribune and Elwood call leader will make their prediction what the Irish final record will be. All coming up on this week's College Football Report.
You're listening to the Central Indiana Sports Report with your host, Greg Mengels.
Welcome, college football fans, to the College Football Report with Eric and Ryan Robinson. Today, joined by Michelle Garmon of the Tipton Tribune and Elwood call leader to talk some Notre Dame Fighting Irish. We are going to break down the offense and the defense, and we're going to talk all things Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Then at the end of the podcast, maybe a few minutes, we're going to get Michelle Garmon's side of the IU football schedule debate. Welcome to the Central Indiana Sports Report, everybody.
Yeah, we had to have a little bit of hype, some music to get us going. I'm fired up. I know Ryan is as well. This is, other than game day, this is a big day because we get to talk Notre Dame football. We start drinking the Kool-Aid. We get everyone involved, and now with the platform here, thanks to Greg, we can get everyone's hopes up, hopefully, and get ready for some Notre Dame football. And coming off of a huge year last year, I think this year things are really lined up. Things look positive. I'm super excited. What do you think, Ryan?
Well, it's August 5th, and I'm in the tunnel getting ready to run out. I'm so ready for this season. And as good as last year was, are we better this year?
I didn't want a spoiler alert too soon.
Yeah, let's not spoil too soon. We're going to get what we think about that coming up here in a minute. The Notre Dame
haters do not want to imagine it, but are we better than last year?
That's a question we'll be answering coming up. All right, so once again, welcome, college football fans. There are 4 people sitting at this table. 3 of them are Notre Dame fans, Notre Dame football fans. So I'm going to mostly bow out, except for probably some smart-ass comments every now and then. Eric, are you going to talk about the offense, the defense, the schedule? We're going to talk about your expectations. We're going to get your thoughts. We're going to get Ryan's thoughts on all of that. But start with what changed in the coaching staff.
Well, big changes with Marcus Freeman and his coaching staff. After the loss to Ohio State, the general manager bolted for USC, and we hired a new GM, and Mike Martin, who's got over 20 years NFL experience in recruiting. He's one of the top scouts in the NFL. He spent the last 4 years with the Detroit Lions, and you look at some of the upgrades and personnel that the Lions have made in the last few years, from going from the bottom to legitimate Super Bowl contenders in the 4 years he's been there, says a lot about him. But you look at what he's done in a short period of time at Notre Dame with recruiting. If you follow that and get alerts like I do and follow some of the other media outlets, Notre Dame is just on fire right now recruiting. They're in line to maybe have the number 1 class in 2026. 27, they just signed the number 2 quarterback in the nation, 5-star kid out of Georgia. So big things are going on since the hire of Mike Martin.
I mean, honestly, it's not hard to convince a lot of kids that that's the coolest place to go play football. It's just not that hard to convince, especially a good coach like Marcus Freeman.
It's been hard. I think Marcus Freeman brings something to the table, unlike, I won't say any coach, but unlike the majority of coaches in college football today. He's got a gift. I think he's a true leader of young men, and I think kids just buy in and just want to play for him. Also, Al Golden, the big loss for Notre Dame on defense. Defensive coordinator Al Golden back to the NFL. We bring in Chris Ash. A lot of question marks on him. And also, Deland McAuliffe left, the running backs coach, who had a huge, very great rapport with Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price. That running back room was really electric last year. He had a big part in that. He goes to the NFL. But I think we actually upgrade at running back coach when we bring in Penn State running back coach Juwan Cedar. This guy is arguably the hottest name in running back coaches in college football. So far, all the feedback from the players at Notre Dame, they love him. He's very similar to Marcus Freeman, very comfortable in his faith, his family life. He kind of has it out in the open for the players to see him.
Sounds like you have some questions about Ash.
I do have questions about Ash because he coached at Rutgers and I thought there'd be a bigger splash for a defensive coordinator. And when they hired him and Freeman have history, so I know there's got to be trust. And that's maybe why the hire was made. I don't know. But I've got questions on the defensive coordinator because he's taken over a very talented defensive unit. Man, I'd hate to see him mess it up. I just don't know a lot about him, to be honest with you.
Just to follow up on that comment about Ash being hired as defensive coordinator, Al Golden, he had a lot of critics on Al Golden as a head coach, but as far as the defensive coordinator, he was elite at Notre Dame. And just to echo Eric's thoughts, we thought there'd be a bigger splash with the new hire. But, we have to kind of trust what Coach Freeman's doing at this point and hope that, Ash is able to continue what Al Golden's already established there at Notre Dame.
Wouldn't you guys be – I would be more concerned with that hire, I think, if Marcus Freeman's background, if his strength was at defense. And I think he's got a system, and I think he probably was looking for a guy that knows what he wants and how he wants things done or coached like that. And so I didn't know much about him either. I'm a little concerned, but I think I would be more concerned if Freeman wasn't, if he didn't have the back, if defense wasn't his background.
Right, and that goes back to the trust. I think there's a relationship there between them. They worked together for a short time. I want to say Cincinnati. I'm not sure. So I know there's a relationship there, and I know Freeman trusts him. I'm going to take, like Ryan said, we got to take Coach Freeman and trust what he's doing. He's not going to make a hire without being 100% committed to it. So I think we just wish for the best and hope that personnel is gonna shine regardless of who's the coordinator. And again, they're in good hands, like you say, Michelle, with Freeman's defensive background.
All right, guys, let's look at the offense and defense, and I want to start on offense because let's face it, and Ryan said this a little bit earlier, could Notre Dame be better than they were last year? And I think the answer is obviously yes, they could be, but so much of this hinges on what happens at quarterback, like so many other teams in the country right now. Eric, your thoughts on the offense?
Well, we're not going to mention the quarterback situation just yet because there's so many other things up front that just blow away last year. Could the offense be better than last year? I don't even think there's any question. The offense is going to be maybe the best offense we've seen at Notre Dame in years. And by far the best offense Marcus Freeman has ever had in his 4 years. And it starts up front with the offensive line. This is a top 5 offensive line in the nation. Maybe, when it's all said and done, maybe the number 1 offensive line in America. Going into the opener last year at A&M, the offensive line was the biggest question. There weren't questions at running back or quarterback. The questions were at offensive line. Last year they only had, starting that A&M game, 6 total starts for the offensive line. This year, the starting offensive line has 58 starts already under their belt. So the narrative about how good's the offensive line? Can they hang in there? Those questions have already been answered. This offensive line is loaded. It starts with right tackle Emil Wagner. He's preseason All-American. Started every game last year. And left tackle Anthony Knapp. He was a freshman last year. Started every game. Only the third freshman in the history of Notre Dame. Let this sink in. Only the third freshman in the history of Notre Dame football to start as a true freshman on the offensive line. And then they get center Ashton Craig, who they lost last year at Purdue. They lost him ACL at Purdue last year for a year. He's back. They're just loaded up front. And some of the comments after the first week of the spring or the fall practice, they go 9 or 10 deep on the offensive line. They're very versatile. They can be moved around. Guards to tackles. Even Jurgensen right now is banged up with an arm injury. He played center. He played left tackle. He played right guard. He's projected to be right guard this year when he comes back. Just lots of things to do up front. Lots of talent. Lots of experience. Outside of the offensive line, you look at the running back room. You got Jeremiah Love, who's a Heisman hopeful. Jadarian Price, who we saw last year step in. Lots of touches, special team touches, catching the ball out of the backfield. The running back room and these two guys are loaded. You also have with Faison and Greathouse on the outside at wide receiver. If you remember the playoff run last year, Greathouse was huge in those games, making play after play. He really emerged as a number one. But then they pick up a guy, Malachi Fields out of Virginia, who was a top portal target by many teams at wide receiver. He's big and strong. He reminds me of Michael Floyd. He's doing all the comments coming out of camp. He is just wowing the coaches and the media right now in just 1 week where they've had access to practice. So I think the offense is just leaps and bounds ahead of any offense we've seen at Notre Dame for a while. Ironically, the only question mark this year is quarterback. And is it going to be C.J. Carr? Is it going to be Kenny Minchey? I felt like it was going to be C.J. Carr all along, but Kenny Minchey is really stepping up and putting a lot of pressure on that battle. I don't think a decision is going to be made for probably 1 to 2 more weeks. And as Coach Freeman repeatedly says, he's not going to make the decision. Those two guys will make the decision for us. One day they're going to walk out of practice and know who their starter is. So we're going to see how that plays out. I think C.J. Carr is more of a pocket passer. Kenny Minchey made some great throws in the spring game. He can run. A little bit different style of quarterback. I can actually see a scenario where both of these guys have to play this year. I don't know how you keep both of them off the field. Obviously, injuries can be a part of it, but I always go by, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have one. I've always believed in that philosophy, but in this case, maybe we do have 2 quarterbacks that are both really good. We'll see how that competition plays out, but
it's not like that's never worked.
Right, and the thing really I like about this situation as well is you have an offensive coordinator who's had 2 years working. We haven't changed offensive coordinators this year. Denbrock's back. These guys have been in that system now for 2 years. They understand it, and Denbrock made a comment a couple of days ago that he's never seen an offense come into fall camp so prepared and game ready. He's never seen it. So the offense is going to be super good this year. The question mark is who's going to be the quarterback.
You know, I'm going to talk about the lineage of some of these Notre Dame players and recruits coming in at the end of the podcast. You do know C.J. Carr is one of those. Do you know C.J. Carr's family?
Yeah, his grandfather is Lloyd Carr.
Yes. So when you talk about that, I mean, I've always felt like, you know, coaches' kids, and I know this is the grandson, but I just feel like a lot of times they understand and they, you know, the game so much. So he may have, I mean, his the cerebral part of the game is he's probably ahead in that, I would imagine, and a lot of it's probably because he's grown up around football, and I am sure that he's watched film and things like that. I think he hung out with Grandpa a lot when he was younger.
Ryan, just so much of this comes down to the quarterback position, doesn't it?
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to quarterback play, and right now we don't know who that's going to be. I think most people would say it's going to be C.J. Carr, but until there's an announcement made, we're kind of in limbo. I kind of think, just my own thoughts, that we're going to be in good hands with either player. Personally, I think C.J. Carr is going to win that job, but from an offensive standpoint, this is a really good receiving staff that we have, and I watched a couple other segments on ESPN and some podcasts, and they're talking like Notre Dame could have 4 receivers all get drafted at the end of this year. So, I mean, whoever's at quarterback is going to have great targets and open receivers. So we're in a really, really good spot right now, I think, offensively. And Eric mentioned the offensive line, and that's where it starts. And Notre Dame's built tradition with offensive line, and that's definitely holding true this season as far as the outlook goes. We're going to be really, really strong up front, and who's ever at quarterback hopefully has enough time to get the ball to one of those 4 great receivers, because we haven't even mentioned Will Pauling, he was a senior transfer through the portal. He's going to get a lot of reps at receiver as well.
Yeah, the kid from Wisconsin.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he's going to get plenty of snaps. So there's just so much depth right now at receiver. And, in the past we've had great receivers, but we haven't had like a tandem like we have right now offensively like that. So this year, I'm just really excited how this year's looking on paper. And barring injury, I think it's going to be a great season.
And having great protection and having a great line in front of you and having great weapons to throw to is all great. So that will obviously help tremendously with whoever plays quarterback. What about the defensive side of the formula, Ryan?
Well, I mean, defensively, it's tough. You get a guy like Xavier Watts who goes to the NFL, Jack Kaiser who goes to the NFL. And if you guys remember, I said during one of the late season podcasts that Jack Kaiser is going to get drafted and he's going to make a roster. And you kind of question my prediction with that, but that's exactly what he's doing. He's going to make that Jaguar roster. Just work ethic alone. He's just a great kid, great work ethic. So, but I mean, I look for Jalen Sneed to step up, Drake Bowen to step up. We got great edge rushing this year with Joshua Burnham, and here's the star of the defense. And he was a freshman last year, and the Miami of Ohio game, he had 2 sacks, 2 tackles for loss, and a forced fumble. And that was like his breakout game. I'm talking about Boubacar Traore. He was starting last year as a freshman, and then the very next week at Louisville, he hurt his knee, and we lost him for the season. He's going to anchor that defense this year, and he's so talented and so athletic, and he's so fast. He's going to disrupt a lot of things defensively. So I think he's going to have a big year. And then as far as the secondary goes, Christian Gray, he got picked on a little bit early last season, but he kind of came into his own and was a great stopper for Notre Dame. I look for him to have a big year. And you also have Jay Nasbury back there. Just a lot of talent. And, one of the things we have to give a little bit of credit to Brian Kelly and what he tried doing with Notre Dame defensively. What he wanted was to speed the secondary up. And Marcus Freeman has just taken that philosophy and taken it to another level. I mean, when you look at our secondary last year and what Marcus Freeman's been able to do, I mean, passing defense last year, we were 4th in the nation, only allowing 169 yards a game. And then scoring defense, only allowing 15.5 points a game. That was also 4th in the nation. He's putting together and recruiting players that normally would have maybe been at SEC schools. And we've watched game after game, season after season of Notre Dame football, we are finally in these last 4 or 5 years seeing secondaries that look like SEC secondaries. And I mean, give Brian Kelly credit for making that a focus, but Marcus Freeman's taking it to a whole new level. And Eric mentioned the recruiting class next year. He's just building and building and building, and this is going to become the norm, I think, at Notre Dame.
Yeah, I want to jump in here on the defensive part too. You got a Don Schuler back there in that secondary, and Leonard Moore, who's probably going to be an All-American, just a sophomore for Notre Dame too. So those are two players to watch. Going to make big-time plays all year. And then a guy who's injured right now and banged up still, Jordan Botelho. I don't know if you remember him from last year. He played 5 quarters, but he was a handful at A&M, and he dominated Purdue for 1 quarter before being hurt. Guy had 4 tackles for losses and 5 sacks in 5 quarters last year. He was everywhere that first game and a half for that front line. I've been trying to find out when they expect him to return to 100%. I can't find anything on him, but remember the name Jordan Botelho because he is a problem up front for offensive lines.
I agree. I think Notre Dame does have some good playmakers on defense. To me, the question is going to be that secondary and how well it gels together, because I thought Notre Dame last year had one of the, if not the best, at least one of the top 5 secondaries in all of college football. And, part of secondary coverage is especially kind of trusting that the other guys, especially when you're back there in certain coverages, zones and everything, is going to be where he's supposed to be. And for the most part, you didn't see Notre Dame make very many mistakes in the secondary, and that would be my only concern going into this season is, that back third of their defense is how is that secondary going to be this year?
I think the secondary is going to be their strong point, and, Watt's leaving. You got a guy stepping up, and Jaden Asbury is going to play the rover this year, and he had 35 solo tackles last year, so his number's going to get called a lot this year. So there's a few different factors that's going to have to step up, but they're not lacking experience in that secondary, which is a good thing. So I look for that. I look for the defense to be very, very solid this year, just like it was last year.
All right, so we like our offense. We like the defense. Quarterback's the big question. Here's another big question, guys. Has Notre Dame ever started with a tougher first 8 games than this year? It is brutal. Week after week, you're playing not every week a great team, but every week at least a pretty decent team.
Well, you're still going to have that narrative out there that Notre Dame doesn't play anybody, and which is it drives me nuts as a Notre Dame fan because we play a consistent, steady schedule every season, but the naysayers always say, well, they don't play anyone because they're not in the conference, but we still play the top teams within conferences. So yeah. this year might be one of our tougher schedules. Just looking at it moving forward, we'll see how teams end up coming out and how well they are, but when you look at the teams that we got lined up this year, it's one of the better schedules Notre Dame's had in the last probably 6 to 8 years.
A lot of the strength of schedule, Eric, is based on how good Miami is going to be, I think. And they might be really good from what we hear. Thoughts on Miami the first week, August 31st, 7:30 on ABC.
Well, my thoughts on the Miami game, I like us going down there and winning that game. We'll get a bye and come back and host Texas A&M. I'm more concerned about that game than the Miami game. My rationale on that Miami game is Carson Beck better than Cam Ward?
No, that doesn't mean his team isn't.
I know, but Miami just were kind of pretenders last year, and they had a really, really good quarterback. Gosh, I like us against Miami. I like us to go down there and handle Miami. I do.
You look at that first matchup down at Miami, and I think they most of the rankings have them at number 10. Notre Dame's bouncing back 4 to 5, so that's going to be a top 10 matchup right out of the gate. And we talked earlier about you got these early matchups like Clemson, LSU, Texas, Ohio State. Notre Dame Miami's another one. You got two
yes,
top
it
10
is.
teams. That's going to start the season off in schedule strength, and people thinking Notre Dame doesn't play anybody. It's just that doesn't carry weight with me.
Notre Dame's had a lot of great moments in that stadium, but they've also had some bad ones.
Well, the last one was a very good one. And that's a victory over Penn State.
Versus convicts, although I don't think that's anywhere near true these days. But no, Notre Dame and Miami, about 20 years ago, they had some really intense battles, and that usually started with skirmishes before the game started. But anyway, it's going to be a good matchup. The key, I think, for Notre Dame too is it's at Miami. It's going to be very humid down there, and very hot. So that may play just a little bit of a factor as far as conditioning and things like that. I look forward. I think it'll be a close. I think it'll be a close game because I do think that. I think the offense is probably going to be more of a little bit of a defensive battle maybe early, because I do think offenses, especially when you have new quarterbacks and some new personnel in there, I think sometimes it can kind of take a while for them to gel. So it should be an interesting game. It should be a very fun game. I mean, those opening games, there's some really good matchups and for some of these teams there week one. Notre Dame, Miami, and like you said, Texas and Ohio State. Pretty fun games.
I don't necessarily want to take this week by week, guys, but they start their first 8 weeks with 8 straight Power 4 conference teams or Boise State, so basically the same thing. And it's not like all these teams are great. Purdue's not very good. Arkansas's not great. NC State isn't fantastic. But anytime you run through a gauntlet like that, there is always the possibility of getting tripped up because all of these teams have elite talent.
I mean, you look at what we did in Northern Illinois last year. I mean, it happens. That's why you play the games.
That's probably Notre Dame's biggest downfall. Is they have a tendency to trip up in some of those games against inferior opponents.
September 20th, maybe that'll be it.
Yeah, you didn't even mention USC on the schedule, like always. I mean,
USC is one of those teams I said from a power conference. Yeah, I said those weren't very good teams, but Miami, Texas A&M, Boise State, USC in the first 5 weeks. Boston College last year had some moments.
Pittsburgh has been playing very good last couple of years.
Pitt has been playing well, but the end of the season, if you can get through that, the schedule really lightens up.
Right, with the last 2 weeks, Syracuse and Stanford, those schools are both down this year. I know Notre Dame fans are hoping for Steve Angeli to play well at Syracuse, and they do come to South Bend. That'll be a fun game. But they lost a lot of personnel. Syracuse is going to be down this year. Stanford's been down for a few. I mean, those should be very easy.
You're talking about Stanford of the Atlantic Coast Conference?
Of the AC. Yeah.
This is ridiculous. We need a sports commissioner as fast as possible. Doesn't even make any sense. All right, let's start with our guest, Michelle, and then go Ryan, then Eric, and then I'll make my prediction as well. It's not official because we don't make our official predictions for a couple of weeks still. But, Michelle, what are you thinking record-wise for the Irish?
Well, I'm sure my nephew, the big Notre Dame fan he is, would really love to see the Irish go undefeated. I just think that's so hard to do anymore. I think one loss. If they won't have any more than 2 losses. I don't believe if they would have 2 losses or more than 2 losses, then it's going to be a very disappointing year in South Bend. And I don't even think that they'll have 2 losses, but there is that capability. I mean, because some years you never know what's going to happen in the USC game. I still think the opener is going to be key, especially with it being on the road. That's my thought anyway. I think it'll be 1 loss, but I could see 2, but not any more than 2.
I think record-wise, we're looking at 11-1. I think when you look at the schedule, it's definitely a 12-0 season, but Notre Dame has a history of tripping up at least once against somebody. And I think the 2 trip-up games, and it's a worthy opponent. It's the opener against Miami of Florida. You know, C.J. Carr does get the quarterback starting job. That's going to be his first game with live action. I think he took 1 snap last year, and it was a knee at Purdue. So I hope the moment's not too big for him there in that opener. And then the next game I look at that could be a trip-up game, and it's actually at home, and that's against USC, just because Lincoln Riley's on such a hot seat. I look for them to really turn things around and have a big season, just because he needs it so bad. So I think that could be another potential loss for Notre Dame, but just expecting maybe we get one of those 2 games. I say 11-1 by the year's end, and then definitely a spot in the playoffs again, and hopefully we can make a deep run.
Yeah, I agree with 11-1. Like I said earlier, I like us at Miami. My concern is A&M coming to South Bend, because we seem to always lose a home game in September. So that's a concern. But looking down, USC is always a good game, but going on the road to Arkansas, that could be interesting, I think. That's not going to be a gimme by any means, but I'm going to take 11-1, another college playoff run.
Thank you so much to Eric and Ryan for joining the Central Indiana Sports Report once again. We are here every Thursday at 5 o'clock, maybe a little later, talking some college football, and we will have some reactions every week once the season gets here. And thanks as always to Michelle for joining us. She is the best. And thank you for listening. Please do us a huge favor and share this podcast with the Notre Dame Fighting Irish fan in your life, and help spread the word that the Central Indiana Sports Report is here, talking about Central Indiana sports every single day. The Central Indiana Sports Report is a product of ITG Media, and I love Susie.